So in this section, we're going to look at something called penetration testing. Penetration testing is all about finding the weaknesses and vulnerabilities in a system so that we can improve the security. In order to do this safely, it's best that we set up our own testing environment so that we can attempt to hack into our own systems. For this testing environment, we're going to use a tool called VirtualBox. It's a way for us to emulate other operating systems on a computer and run them at the same time. So we can load up a Linux system and a Windows system and try and communicate between the two on one computer. We can also isolate the network it's on so that we're not messing with our actual network, and we can keep it more localized in case anything goes wrong. For our particular demonstration, we're going to use a distribution of Linux called Kali Linux, which is specialized for cybersecurity and hacking because it has all the tools preloaded. That way we don't have to go out and install anything once we get our system all set up. The victim system we're going to use is Windows XP, and it's going to be either Service Pack 1 or 2, whatever one we end up, whether one is easier to find, really. And that's because the exploit that we have chosen to take advantage of was patched in later editions of Windows. So it's easier if we just use the XP, plus it's a little bit smaller. We can kind of, it takes less to run it too, so that'll help out. The last one, Metasploitable, is a cybersecurity distribution of Linux that is meant to be hacked. So it's going to have a larger variety of vulnerabilities automatically available, and there's less setup time for that. When we go through some of our phases of the hack, you'll see how much more accessible that system is than the other two. We'll give you a quick overview of what the VirtualBox system looks like, and if you want to install these on your own, we'll kind of go through that so you could take a look at that if you'd like to. To get a better understanding of how a cyber attack works, we're going to break it down into the steps that go along with completing a hack. The first thing we want to break down is what type of hackers there are. I'm sure you've heard of a couple of these. The first one, White Hat, is a hacker that works directly with the company in order to improve their security of their network. The Gray Hat is more of like a freelance hacker. They can work with the company to help fix bugs, or they can act maliciously and find vulnerabilities and sell those off. Black Hat is usually categorized just for the malicious hacks that happen either to cause damage to a network or to terrorize a system for a political stunt. Those hacks are done without permission, and that's the main difference between a black hat and the white hat, is that permission step. Because really, the hacks don't look too different besides that malicious intent. So that damage to the network is a key difference also. It's kind of weird though, because when you think about hacking, you usually think of it in a negative sense, to where you're thinking that the hacker's automatically doing damage to the network. But there is a term called ethical hacking for those white hat hackers, where you have a scope of what you can touch in a network, and you work with an organization to really identify what strengths and weaknesses the system has, so that you can improve those and hopefully defend better against future attacks. So if you are thinking about doing the labs with us, a key thing to remember is that hacking in the US is a felony, so you must have permission to attack or test any other network that's not owned by you. So to get around that, we are using our VirtualBox because we will own those systems that we install on there, and we can isolate and really sandbox out those hacks in order to learn more about them. One of the most important concepts of cybersecurity is the CIA triad or triangle. It's built up of three terms: confidentiality, availability, and integrity. and each play a role in describing um, the security of a system. Confidentiality, the first one, is who has access to the information. So you want to make sure that the right people can see the information, and you don't want sensitive information getting out to the wrong people. So this can come in the sense of passwords, firewalls, and maybe in a physical sense, you could think of it as uh, doors with keycard slots or uh, biometric readers. So this is more about keeping that data secure. The next idea is integrity, and this is more about the data itself. You want to make sure that the data does not change in its life cycle. Um, and by that we kind of mean it doesn't change, uh, it cannot be changed by unauthorized people. And the way that we can check against this is either with password protection or using checksums. Checksums are just long strings of numbers that are unique to that specific file. So if we download a file from a website, we can look at its checksum and compare it to the checksum that's on the website and see if they're the same. If they're not the same, we know that something has changed in transit or before we downloaded it. The last one is availability, and this is about users having access to the data uh, when it's needed. When you're setting up a network, you want to make sure that it's as available as possible to your consumers, and you want to prevent against attacks that might try to disrupt that. So one of the common ones would be a DDoS attack, which attacks servers, tries to take them down from getting too much traffic, from using artificial traffic to increase the load on the servers. So you want to prevent against that by putting in measures that stop uh, a certain type of load from reaching the server and keeping it up for the other customers. So when we're looking at a hacker's methodology, there's actually more steps that go into it than you might think, especially in the beginning. You really want to be performing some sort of reconnaissance and scanning to identify what the system is you're attacking, who's using it, what part of organization it's with, so that you can have an easier time of finding what vulnerabilities you're going to attack and what kind of exploits you'll use for those systems. When you get into later phases of gaining access, escalation of privileges and maintaining access, this is what's going to look more traditionally like a hack because you're getting involved with the victim PC and seeing an actual effect on it. So you're seeing that, oh, I can do certain things to the victim PC at this point. The last step, covering tracks, is just a way of quieting your attack. So making sure that you're less noticeable, and you really want to pretty much be stealthy or invisible when you're making an attack. So the first step, performing reconnaissance, is more so on the research side. So you're doing social engineering, maybe you're doing a email phishing, uh, or you're just doing research on the company or organization that that you're thinking of attacking. In this step, you're looking through a lot of stuff you wouldn't think of, really, like resumes, job posting, contact names on websites, pretty much any information that will give you a clue into what the system architecture is and what accounts to look for. For example, if you have a resume, you might have information about what kind of systems the person's worked on in the past at that company. So you'll see, oh, they're using this type of Microsoft server, or they're using this type of coding language. Same with job postings. You'll see the company looking for a specific type of person to help with their tech that they have at their organization. So once you find those, you can start narrowing down what aspects to attack later on. Some of the tools we'd use for reconnaissance are Googling. You can also use social networking to see who works at the company, what they do, and seeing if that's an access point for you. You can also use NSLOOKUP, traceroute, or ping to identify some of the systems part of that network. And the last three will give you some more information about the servers architecture that they use for either their website or their or their email systems. One thing to remember is that the reconnaissance phase is all passive, so you're not actually leaving any footprint when you're doing this. So for the scanning and enumeration phase, this is the part where we actually start making contact with the servers that we're thinking about attacking. And this is where we're really prodding for all those weak points and finding out more information about the OSs uh, and versions related to those ports that we're accessing. For this, we can use a tool called ZenMap, which is a user interface that's built upon the Nmap tool, which is probably one of the more popular tools for scanning about system information. What's nice about this is it has pre-built profiles for scanning that allows us to do a variety of things. So for instance, you have a ping, which is just going to see what ports are available and what IPs are out there on the network that we are within. So for our local network that we've set up, we only have three systems. We have the Kali Linux system, we have the Microsoft system, and we have the Metasploitable system. So all three of those should show up, and as we increase the intensity of those profiles to quick, regular, intense, it'll give us more information about each of those systems so that we can identify what pieces we may want to attack. The next step is about gaining access. So this is the first part of the hack where it feels like you're getting involved with the victim PC. So here, since we already have a exploit in mind that we know that works, we already know our weak point and we know what payload we'll use with our exploit. And to make it more clear, let's talk about those three terms. So vulnerability, exploit, and payload. So I know I've been saying it a bunch, but vulnerability is just that weakness in the system that we want to take advantage of. Our exploit is the method we're going to use to gain access to that system, and the payload is finally that malicious code or virus that will actually take advantage of the vulnerability and allow us to enter the system. So if you break this down to simpler terms, a vulnerability could be thought of as an unlocked front door of a house. The exploit is actually opening the door, and the payload is the stealing portion of what's inside the house. So in our hack lab, our goal is to take control of the Windows XP system through our Kali Linux OS. And we want to access the Windows XP terminal so that we can pretty much run any sort of programs you want and modify anything on the system we want. In order to do this, we have to make sure some things are set up so that the vulnerability still works. Like I mentioned before, we have to use a Windows XP that's before the Service Pack 3 that was released in 2008 so that the vulnerability is not patched. We also have to enable file sharing and disable the firewall to make it a little bit easier to run this hack. The tools we'll need is that Metasploit framework that's already built in to the Kali Linux through its terminal, and MetaInterpreter, which will allow us to drop in our payload once we exploit the system. And that's already built in with the Metasploit framework. We'll just show you how that goes once we're inside.